Hey everyone, tonight I would like to explore a world of exotic tales with you. I'm going to tell you about 1001 Nights, also known as the Arabian Nights. I guess you know about very famous tales such as Aladdin's Wonderful Lamp or Sinbad the Sailor. But where do these stories come from? How and when did they become so popular? These are going to be aspects of my story today, and of course, hoping that you enjoy good stories like me, I'm going to tell you about some of these tales. So please, make yourself comfortable. You can close your eyes and just let me guide you through the wonders of this world. 1001 Night is a compilation of tales that were gathered in the Islamic world. Tales that came from many different origins, from India, from Persia, from Arab countries. And the originality of 1001 Nights is that all the tales, all the stories are enclosed within a larger frame story. And this frame story of Persian origin says that there was once a king, a sovereign, called Shahryar, who was infuriated against women for their supposed infidelity, and in his bitterness he decided to have his wife executed and to regularly marry a new wife and kill her after the first night. But there is a second character, Scheherazade, a smart princess who starts telling stories to the king the first night, and the king becomes so hooked by the stories, he wants to know what is going to happen next, or he wants another story, that he postpones all the time the execution of Scheherazade, and after 1001 Nights of tales, he realizes that he is in love with her and renounces to his vengeance against women. Now this collection of tales was famous for centuries, since medieval times in the Islamic world. It had been compiled by various scholars in the Middle East, in North Africa, in Persia and India. But in the Arab world, or in Persia, it was considered a minor work and was not extremely famous because tales of that kind were regarded as a minor genre in literature, and other styles like poetry were much more successful and praised by educated people. But from the 18th century, these tales started to be known outside the Islamic world, and it is the translation into French and English that would ensure their success in the entire world. And to understand this, we need to make a bit of history and talk about the rise of Orientalism in Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries. As you know, the relations between the Islamic and Christian world during the Middle Age were rather conflictual, and the cultural and scientific exchanges were very limited. There had been the Crusades, and generally the Europeans looked at the Islamic world with a mix of fear and defiance, because the Islamic civilization was advanced, powerful, and expansionist. But this started to change from the Renaissance and the 17th century. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire from Turkey had reached the height of its power, and then it started to decline, not so much in the 17th century, when it remained a threat to Christian kingdoms in the Balkans or in the Mediterranean Sea, but the relationships between the Ottomans and Europe started to normalize. For example, there was an alliance between the Ottomans and France against the empire of Charles V of the Habsburgs, Austria and Spain. And in the 17th century, the Turks, the Ottomans, started to lose territory, starting in the Balkans, and this was amplified in the 18th century, when the Ottoman Empire started a period of decadence. It would fall so much into decadence that in the 19th century the Ottoman Empire started to disaggregate, lose its territories. It lost Greece and the rest of the Balkans, and lost control on Egypt and many of the regions it controlled before. And this changed a lot the look that the Europeans had on the Islamic world, because from the 18th century, or even the end of the previous century, the Islamic world was less and less perceived as a threat, as a danger, and increasingly perceived as an exotic, mysterious, and attractive region. And this appeal for exotism and North Africa, the Middle East, was quickly called orientalism, and orientalism was the taste, the interest for these exotic countries that were increasingly perceived as mysterious, wealthy, decadent too, and generally attractive. And this through various pictorial movements, through literature, through decorative arts, had a strong impact on European culture in the 18th and even more in the 19th century. Painters, and especially romantic painters, or their followers in the second half of the 19th century, liked to travel to the Middle East or North Africa and represent these typical picturesque scenes in Orientalism with plenty of stereotypes, the harems with dozens of women, the exotic landscapes with palm trees and harmonious architecture. And the success of the Arabian Nights found its roots in the success of Orientalism in Europe. To be clear, Orientalism is not really about the Islamic or Oriental world as it is. It is more about the taste of Europeans for exotism. It was often patronizing or condescending, but in a sense it also helped to develop the curiosity and the knowledge, ultimately, of the Islamic world in Europe. And the success of 1001 Nights started at the beginning of the 18th century, when this collection of stories was translated by a Frenchman called Antoine Galland in 1704, more than 3 centuries ago. The first translation that was quickly followed by another one in English in 1706, and the success of these tales in Europe was immediately very large. They became famous and entered the popular culture in the 19th century. Actually, some of the most famous tales from the Arabian Nights, such as Sinbad the Sailor, or Ali Baba and 40 Thieves, and even Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, were not in the initial compilation of stories. They were known in the Middle East too, but they were added to the Arabian Nights by the European translators, and the original tales, even though they still represent the bulk of the Arabian Nights, are generally less famous than these ones. It would be hard to say how many stories there are in the Arabian Nights, because from one version to another, the number of tales can be very different, but there are themes in many of these tales, such as destiny and fate. But interestingly, the characters, if they are smart enough, if they are moral persons, can exit their condition and find a better position in the society. Actually, many tales in 1001 Nights emphasize the importance of intelligence. The smart one generally wins, or manages to avoid the trouble he's in by using his intelligence. And there are many common elements between the tales from 1001 Nights and various European fairy tales written in the 18th century or in the 19th century. The dream or the aspiration to elevate yourself from your social position to a higher one. The repetition of words or phrases, which is also very often used in European fairy tales. And this is not that surprising, because like in Europe, or that's a common point with tales from China or Japan, these stories had a goal. They were written and told for the education, the edification of younger generations, so they transmitted values that their parents wanted them to adopt. And sometimes some of the stories have several versions, and the messages can be different. This is the case with the story of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, for example. The most famous version of this story is the story of a poor young man who has no resource, called Aladdin, and he is recruited as a disciple by a magician, a master, who tries to use him to find a magic lamp. And Aladdin finds the lamp, in which a powerful genie is a prisoner or lives, and uses this power to become rich and powerful and fulfill his dreams, in the process taking down his maleficent master. But there is another version in which the master is good and Aladdin does not manage to control the new powers he has found with the lamp, and finally he loses everything and is punished for his stupidity and ignorance. In the 19th century, these tales were translated and edited in many languages, and their success was huge throughout the world, probably indicating or revealing the universal appeal of these characters and storylines. And actually, the structure of many of these tales were inherited from even more ancient civilizations, from Egypt, from Mesopotamia, and beyond the attractive, exotic build-up of the stories in 1001 Nights, we probably find structures, storylines that speak to some of our deep aspirations, the aspiration to elevate oneself, the hope or the belief that good is stronger than bad, or the hope that wherever we come from, we have a brilliant destiny waiting for us, or maybe even that in a world of chaos with forces that are extremely difficult to understand and control, often represented by monsters or genies, in the case of the Arabian Nights, our courage and intelligence can be sufficient to bring order and guarantee our safety and happiness. That will be all for today. As usual, I hope you enjoyed this moment, and I'll see you soon for another topic. Bye bye.